This is Noah Pred for Native Instruments, here to look at one of my favorite echo, dub, and delay plugins, which is Replica XD, included with the latest version of Complete. All the samples we'll be using are from Manifest Audio, available on sounds.com, and that stab is pretty dry, so I'll go to the browser and navigate to the Replica XD device in the audio units section and drop it on the MFA stab track. So here we have two basic modes, standard or ping pong. Ping pong, of course, going back and forth, left to right in the stereo field, or standard, just replicating the stereo input. Now I can switch from single to dual mode, which is going to give me two different delay lines. The feedback governs both delay lines simultaneously, how long they continue to decay for, but in parallel mode, the initial input signal is processed through them separately. Now, each of these delay lines can be selected from 4 different time modes: straight, dotted, triplet, or millisecond. Now, if I go back to serial mode, then each of those 8th note triplet delays is then being forced through the 32nd note triplet delay, or switching to milliseconds. Each 8th note triplet was being forced through the 40 milliseconds. But for the rest of this example on the stabs, I'll leave it in single delay line mode, and I've got it on a dotted 8th, and we can see in the time grid above the interaction between the timing and the feedback. Now, the default Replica XD delay line mode is modern, and as I increase the saturation, you'll hear a bit of grit added as the feedback increases. I like to bring the low cut up, and this allows me to carve the frequencies out of the feedback line. And I don't want them very muddy, so I tend to leave the low cut up a little bit, and the low and high cut settings are remembered when I switch modes, but the delay modulation, which I can enable in mono or stereo, creates a bit of a widening chorus effect, and I prefer to leave it on a more subtle setting. So now it's time to look at the other styles, and Replica XD gives us 5, second of which is analog, which provides a deliciously programmed bucket brigade style analog delay circuit commonly found in many guitar pedals. There are 4 bucket brigade types we can choose from, in increasing cleanliness from left to right, but I prefer the darker and grungier versions, which give a little more character, a little more bite, a little more dirt. What's the point of using an analog model if that's not what I'm going for? Now I can disable the sync and select any BPM I want, but for most purposes, I imagine you'll want to leave the host sync enabled. So now going to the panning mode, I can pan the original dry input signal left and the wet feedback line right, increasing the width and increasing the left-right offset, so a slight increase in stereo information. Now that hi-hat line is quite shuffled, so I've opted to impose some shuffle on the timing of the 16th notes. You can also adjust the feel, making it more rushed or lagging behind. And by increasing the accent on the offbeat, I can actually create between the swing shuffle and the offbeat accent really intricate rhythmic patterns that are very difficult to apply with other delay plugins on the market. The swing or shuffle amount in particular allows me to really place the delay line in the pocket with the other rhythmic programming in a production. So now I'll switch to the vintage digital mode as I continue to play with the ducking options, which with the super high feedback, I can impose some ducking so that while the feedback continues out, every dry input reduces the volume over the release time there. So I've got it pretty subtle now. There's not a lot of ducking going on, but I'm just going to reduce the accent a little bit. And maybe let's look at the ping pong, where I've got the option menu to switch from left-right to right-left. And as I increase the modulation depth and rate, We can choose to have the delay only go to the modulation, or the dry input signal and the delay fed to the modulation. So Vintage Digital is actually one of my favorite delay models here. So I increase the feedback with the medium quality or even some of the lower qualities. Get some nice, dirty, classic character, some crunchiness, especially on the crunch setting, of course, as we get more digital artifacts imposed on the delay tail. The modern style is a lot cleaner. Vintage Digital gives a little more character. But then if you really want classic dub styles, the tape might be your best bet. So here we've got saturation, tape age, and wow and flutter. So I increase the saturation amount as the feedback increases. We get this increasing sort of growing distortion. Wow and flutter is going to emulate the degraded tape heads, providing some pitch artifacts. I can enable the noise, and then with the noise on in particular, the tape age will increase the noise amount, but also roll off some of the high end on the saturation. So now what really kicks Replica into high gear is the effects section. You can choose one of these effects, and I've got the flanger on there right now, which I can of course click to change the rate of in musical note intervals. And we've got some other modulation effects in there as well, but I'm going to try the frequency shifter, which is going to actually shift the frequencies of each delay tail either progressively or one at a time in one of these 5 different modes. If I toggle that button up at the top, then the regen mode progressively shifts the frequency of each successive repetition. So that means that the frequencies will shift more and more with each repeat. Now I've switched to the filter mode, which is great for classic sort of dub echoes, especially with resonant filter sweep on there. And can impose a bit of an LFO on there, and that's also in the regen mode, which means that each echo tap is going to become increasingly resonant. Now the pitch shifter is emulating some classic delay units, and rather than the freak shifter, which is shifting only in frequency, it's shifting in pitch semitones. So here I've switched off the regeneration so that each echo is shifted to the same degree, whereas if I enable the regeneration, it'll progressively increase or decrease. Now there's chorus mode, and I particularly like the phaser. It's a very rich multipole phaser, and I'll get it in a synchronized rate here. And you can really hear the King Tubby style phase delay effect on there. So now let's look at this little acid line that's been bouncing away for a little while here. And I'll increase the dry wet, which can be locked so that presets don't change the dry wet setting. And I've got the micro pitch on there for a little extra spread. And this is just to give it a little stereo width. So this is a much more subtle application of Replica XD. And of course I can switch between the A/B to test different settings, check the different styles. The A/B toggle is a great way to investigate different options for making some more subtle changes. And of course Replica XD comes with a whole host of presets to choose from. Now I've got another replica in the final diffusion mode placed on return A, so I've just sent the stabs to it. And the diffusion mode comes with a sparse or a dense mode. And 3 controls govern its behavior: the overall amount, the size of the diffusion, and the amount of movement of the diffusion. And it basically is a highly reverberant delay network, great for creating all kinds of ambient atmospheres. And I'm actually going to put it through the pitch shifter here, which can create all sorts of strange atmospheric ambience. Gets a little eerie at higher mix settings, but I think I'll go for a more subtle pitch shifting as it goes up an octave on the left and 7 semitones on the right. So Replica XD, an incredibly versatile and powerful delay unit. It can do almost anything you would want any delay plugin to do, and it's an amazing sound design tool for everything from intricately rhythmically programmed delays to classic dub effects to wild atmospheric sound design.